Okay, this is Plug Unplug by MT Karthik. That's me, MTK. For 25 years, technology has outpaced our language, and small factions of corporate and political interests have taken advantage of it. Most viciously, recently, now this was in the aughts, the neoconservatives in response to 9/11. We are beginning to witness, however, the birth of incredibly nuanced discussions about our technology, from the highest work in the academy, like that of Dr. Vaidyanathan, whom I spoke of earlier, to the shortest burst of a video that goes viral in literally seconds to achieve global fascination, peak into a wild, startled awareness, and then drift into a pool of most viewed videos where generations down the road now slowly they'll link to it as data for a year or more, or by word of mouth for a decade, crying Jordan. Through pressure, force, and will, and indeed the collective will of masses through democracy and a free press, capitalism has become the defining social labor and management order in every nation state in the world. It has redefined the means of labor and production even in the former Soviet bloc, in such a complete way that now the term anti-capitalist just seems, archaic and jaded. And I'm not even sure how to describe it. You can't say anti-capitalist. I'm anti-capitalist, which was something you could have said in the 80s or 90s. Just doesn't make sense today. Technology, high technology, information science, and computing all folded really easily into the model. It was an inevitability of the form, leaving military control and entering the USA's industrial power sector. Silicon Valley and the many scientists in Massachusetts, Illinois, and elsewhere should be revered for their work, but we must remember they were financed and fueled by immense corporate interests that had grown ever tied to the universities during the 1990s. Stanford.edu was Google Inc. We must observe and acknowledge the moment of all this. This all just happened. It is the U.S. ingenuity and willingness to experiment and creativity at its greatest. In biotech, the human genome team that beats Ventnor, and in computing, the authors of the internet. The social networking generation, however, a generation later, is an import to the Valley and content-based, not software-based. User friendliness. It is fundamentally derivative work. And that is what's onerous about that year 2010 when The Social Network was nominated for an Oscar and Zuckerman was the man of the year rather than Assange, say. The sheer descent into nothingness of what we produce. Global capitalists have used and grown bloated by using tech. They've succeeded in creating workers and an international market of profit for their accumulation of wealth among a minority of private owning interests. They have suckered the majority of workers into accepting this state of alienation, numbing masses with superficial compensation and preventing resistance through endless repetition of propaganda via commercial mass media. Bread and circuses, indeed. Game of Thrones, Rick and Morty, something to constantly entertain. A fluid spectrum now of entertainment, so it doesn't have to be timed. You have to get there on Thursday night to watch it. Irrelevant. Just constantly entertaining the mind to keep them fundamentally roped in. Now, much consumer technology is soma, masking the powerlessness of the individual with fantasy power. Struggling against a true minority, the clique of power elites who have ruled through Thatcher and Reagan, Major and Bush and Obama and Trump, the globalist Clinton, Blair, and imperialist Bush and Blair regimes, an exceptionally hardy current of anti-capitalist thought has survived the last 30 years of radical transformation of our world by technology in the hands of neoliberal capitalists, globalists, and in the 21st century US and Israeli neoconservatives. Globalism is now their inevitability. It will either be built like a staging area for a unified human future, you can think Star Trek, or shoved down the throat of the world through multinationals and globalist structures like the IMF and World Bank, coming down to one company owning water, Brondo. This will discard and enslave and kill millions. But through our interconnectivity, another globalism, globalism with a small g, has already and inevitably been born. A globalized movement brought to an end apartheid in South Africa, and I was proud to be a part of that. A globalized movement marked millions, 15, 20 million, against Bush, Blair, and Osnar's impending war on Iraq on February 15th of 2003 and throughout the 6 months before that. They dumped Aznar in the wake of that. We're becoming globalized, and our shared concern for Chilean miners and the situation in Gaza and Jerusalem, or after earthquakes, hurricanes, and tsunami in our world's poorest countries, or as we watch climate change happen and the ice melt, we're becoming globalized. Anti-globalism thus is passé. The term compromises new and tender worldwide connections being born from pure intellectual discourse and social concern. We ought to speak directly to the problems global capitalism brings to the world: massive inequity and excessive competition for control of common resources, while acknowledging that transformation must happen within globalist structures because of their ubiquity. In fact, capitalist-produced technologies, like the internet, have allowed the other, our humanist globalism, to flourish. The internet is the result of ingenuity and creativity of scientific labor working in the US system, but it only works if interlinked. We all use it to organize and to distribute information. Its invention is the blessing. Its capitalization and politicization is the issue. I have some stuff here about the election in 2008. This piece, as I've said, is somewhat old. But that is Plug Unplug, the intro, in these 10 parts. I'd like to publish this book. The book goes on and covers a variety of topics and would have to be rewritten to be contemporaneous. But I've been taking notes, and there are many ways that I think a lot of what's happened fits into what the final book, Plug Unplug, could be. The way it concluded the intro was like this. I've used the internet with artists and cultural institutions to connect across 4 continents, to make, transport, and install large-scale cross-cultural art. And pieces of an extraordinary nature that communicate large ideas. I've been able to realize these works because of technology, interconnectivity, the net, and indeed simply by having been born when I was. It is time to accept both the power and the range of these tools to make major leaps in human consciousness now, on a global scale. And capitalism is about this big in that. This work, Plug Unplug, is dedicated to my son, O.M. Millen. This is M.T. Karthik, 2011. I'm going to conclude part 10 and put it up at the end of these 10 here. I hope you enjoyed this. I am M.T. Karthik. This is, or was, Plug Unplug.